Welcome to the NCDWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NCDWI guy, Jake Minnick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 162 of the NCDWI Guy podcast. On today's episode, joining me is the immediate past president of the Mecklenburg County Defense Bar Association. Rob Heroy is on the podcast today. Rob and I go all over the map on today's episode. We talk about his time at the DA's office and lessons that he took away from the DA's office. Also, some great practical tips for attorneys dealing with DAs, as well as for young ADAs that are getting ready to or just started a position in the DA's office. Talks about his passion for criminal defense. We talk about running. We talk about the time that Rob spent getting pretty high up on the ladder in the world of poker and how that has helped him in his law practice. Rob is an incredible lawyer, a number of high-profile cases, all level of district court and felony cases. He's done appeals, motions for relief, post-conviction relief, with great success, and distills so many great lessons during our conversation today. Really enjoyed this conversation with Rob, and hope you do the same. Well, Rob, I'm very excited to have you on the show. It's really cool the way that we've kind of had this recent connection through the world of running. So I feel like that in addition to the passion of the practice of law is this amazing shared interest. But because of that, very excited to have you on the show today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. It was a interesting connecting to another lawyer through Strava instead of some other means. So yeah, glad to be here. I listened to a couple podcasts over the weekend to kind of get warmed up and enjoyed it. I don't know if my kind of getting started stories are as cool as David Teddy's, but
it is it's fun listening to the stories, and that's part of the reason why I like to go through that first, because everybody just has kind of their own unique path of kind of coming down this crazy world that is criminal defense. But yeah, it's definitely the first connection point being through Strava is definitely unique. That's a first in terms of podcast guests. So you're entering into new waters on that front.
All right. Well, happy to start that off for you.
Well, yeah. Tell me. I think this is always just like an interesting place to start with any guest that I have on the show. Is just tell us a little bit about kind of what got you into the world of criminal defense. Like how did you end up in law school? What led to that, and then kind of what led to this particular practice area?
You know, I don't have one of these stories about I grew up, wanting to be a lawyer in my head from the time I was 15. I mean, I really just kind of looked into it. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was 20, 21 years old. Went to Chapel Hill. The jobs I'm looking at, nothing grabbed my interest at all. And so the thought's like, well, I guess I'll go back to school for a while here. And it was Chapel Hill. It was the springtime. Our basketball team was killing it. I could spend a little more time here. So, studied up and, did all that and, wound up back there and get back there in the fall. And I'm like, I really should have taken a chance to go somewhere else another 3 years in the same place. But, I got there. Even with criminal law, I did some different internships, and various civil contexts and was really bored to tears. And my third year of law school, I took a class that they do in conjunction with the School of Government called judicial sentencing, or something along those lines, or criminal sentencing. I don't remember what it was called, but one of my buddies took it and said it was just a fun class where you go and you kind of meet some lawyers and judges, you go out to dinner, and it's an easy A. And so I found myself there and got to know a judge up here in Charlotte who's like, you should really talk to Peter Gilchrist here in the district attorney's office. I think you might enjoy it. And I connected with him and started off in the DA's office and kind of took it from there. So
yeah, that's awesome. I think it is funny because I do love having like these attorneys that have parents or grandparents that have been lawyers, and like it's just like that's part of life, that's part of growing up, and that's the path towards law. But I'm much more in the same camp of like that last year of college rolled around and it was like, man, I better think of something to do. That's it. I'm running out of time. And, there was a need to make money, right? Like you can't just stay in school forever. So it's kind of like, what's the next career path? And for me, as a philosophy major, it was like go into teaching or find like a different path to go down, so it was a good background, but certainly there was not a lot of like opportunity in that arena, which I still love, like reading philosophy and kind of talking about it with some of my friends from college. But beyond that, it was like, got to go find something real to do. So, and then, going into law school, for me, it was real estate. The real estate boom was going on. I had interned here with a great friend that I still talk to regularly. Great real estate lawyer. And then first year in law school, 2007, like the big real estate market crash. And so I was like, all right, well, that's probably not going to be where the best place to go into is. So criminal law was one of those things that through a couple of classes and then an internship myself, like that was kind of how I stumbled into that world. So kind of a similar path, but the DA's office, I feel like, is such a great ground for exposure of criminal law. And tell us a little bit about kind of what that felt like. What was like the, I'm sure that there's some sort of like, statewide, obviously they have like the new prosecutor school and that type of thing, but I'm sure each county is a little bit different in terms of like their kind of like onboarding or training. What did that look like for you in terms of the first few weeks at the DA's office?
Sure. I will come back to your real estate law with one story. This is kind of like the moment when I remember thinking, I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I remember sitting there at a job interview with some law firm, and they're like, so tell us what it is that has attracted you to real estate law. I'm like, what do I say here? I mean, you're going to pay me to do it? Like,
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That was, having to come up with how exciting my property law class was.
It was so boring. It really was. Like it was. There was never any moment during that internship where I was excited to be doing that type of law, but he was just running and still is like running such a great business. I was like, this seems like a good path. But yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, there's no passion in terms of like, this is what I want to do for the next 20 years.
It's like that dude's talking to Dustin Hoffman about plastics, the future of plastics. And I'm just sitting there with glazed eyes. 23-year-old who still has no idea what to do. So the DA's office, it was, I think most everyone else there had interned in the DA's office. So they had a little more footing, but it's it's very much sink or swim. They threw us in there, and my first day in there, I'm trying a case, not anything major. I think it was like a speeding ticket or a simple assault or something like that. And you'll be assigned sort of a trainer within the office who sits there with you, but it's also a lot of, you got to learn pretty quickly on your feet. You got to learn to talk to people. I remember, I didn't moot court and that kind of thing, but I wasn't used to addressing a whole lot of people. And so, you're supposed to do these docket calls, showing up right off the bat, with 300 people in the audience just staring at you. And you're sitting there like, are they going to figure out that I have no idea what I'm doing here? So there's that. We had a new prosecutor school. I think they stopped doing it there for various reasons that I probably am not allowed to get into, but it used to be at the Grove Park. But I think enough rowdy district attorneys driven that to other locations less susceptible to property damage and whatever else. So, spent some time there learning things, kind of going over the concepts and breaking down trial practice and the elements of everything. And so it was a great experience. Had a great class of folks that I started with too. My first day I started with my wife, who that was awesome. Pretty awesome. We met each other the first day on the job, and then Dina King, who's now our U.S. attorney for the Western District of North Carolina. Michael Stadding, one of our new Court of Appeals judges. Matt Rupp, who's now a judge not too far from your way.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. What a
pretty
what a great group to be with. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Dang. That's serious.
I know, right? I'm like, and then here I am. So.
Yeah, I think that's
a great training ground.
Yeah, I feel like it's just one of those just amazing opportunities to kind of see action like right from the get-go. I mean, that's what I've seen in most of the counties that I practice in, kind of that, get your teeth into something, first day in district court, and it's a lot of that kind of hands-on training, sometimes with maybe another ADA kind of coaching or kind of sitting standby, and then pretty quickly you're there doing it all by yourself. And I also think that in terms of just communication skills, obviously you've got like all of the great skills that come from trying cases, but in terms of like managing people and communicating with people, that docket call and having to like very quickly in just a matter of seconds, like kind of get the case from your officer, and then communicate, here's what we're doing to victim, and then explain what the next case is coming up for the judge. It really is quite like a ADAs that are really skilled in that fashion. It's kind of like beautiful to watch, because there's just so many like conversations that are taking place. I mean, literally like hundreds of many conversations a day in district court, and so it's just such a good grounds for learning to communicate effectively with people, how to empathize with victims, and even with the defendants that are you're getting to talk to that are not represented. It's such a cool thing to watch, ADAs that are just running around doing all these things, because that's one thing I feel like would really be a struggle for me personally in that position, is just seemingly like this constant multitasking that is going on in that process. So it's a crazy job. The district court world is just such a hefty world on the DA's position. So I don't know if you had anything else on that front, but I'm always impressed.
I think one of the other things that I gained from it, and maybe not just from my time there, but also from still having some great friends that are over there, and a spouse who was over there for a long time, is to do a good job. I feel like you really have to appreciate the entire system, how it comes together. There's some defense attorneys that I feel like get really upset over prosecutors for kind of doing their job. And it's learning to sort of temper that, because it's easy to say, that jerk over there, has no compassion. But at the same time, being able to step back and see, hey, the district attorney and the police, they've got a pretty important job to do. That we can't have drunk drivers going all over the place hitting people. You can't have people selling dope, on the corner right uptown. It's just not going to create a stable environment. And so sort of getting to understand both sides of things, I think really kind of helps you be able to do a much better job presenting your case when you can sort of see both sides of things. It's like, you can't succeed in the matrix until you see the matrix, that sort of thing. And so I think that has made a big difference in my practice. And, judges, I think, listen a lot more when you can come in and fully acknowledge both sides of an argument, and instead of letting the DA sort of pounce on you for not bringing it up. So that side, I think, has been really helpful.
Yeah. I think I think anybody that has made that switch over from either, private or public defender to DA or vice versa, there's just like such an element of understanding, and you really kind of see just a wisdom that really can't be taught otherwise without that kind of prior experience. It's just some of the best defense lawyers that I know are former prosecutors, and some of the best DAs are people that have that background in the defense world, because there is that understanding. And without that, the only other way that I feel like you can try to get a little semblance of that is to, sit down with somebody that's sitting at the other table outside of the madness of the courtroom. Like, it's very difficult. Obviously, you can create some level of, rapport or respect through just interacting in the courtroom. But I feel like, whether it's, sitting down in the office, outside of the courtroom, or, going out for a drink or something, and just kind of having a little bit of insight into some of these issues that the other side is dealing with is so valuable. And I feel like that's been really helpful in my practice, is just having conversations with DAs in the past, that kind of has given me a little bit of insight into, the just laundry list of frustrations that they are having to deal with, where it's just like, you don't see that in real time, or don't think about it in real time without, having experienced it or talked with somebody that has.
Right. Yeah. Like one tip I've kind of started trying to get better at lately is the fact that, a line district attorney is going to be reporting to a supervisor, and they're not necessarily going to be making a lot of these decisions on their own. And so one, there is some empathy that comes there, but then two, it's made me have a different focus when I come into a meeting with the prosecutor. Now, instead of just coming in and, kind of shooting off my points, I come in with a written list of them, kind of going through positive and negative factors, almost sort of like a prosecution memo that they might submit to a supervisor, and then just leaving it with them when I go to give them an opportunity to, when they go back and talk to their supervisor, instead of just coming back and being like, yeah, the defense attorney had some good points. I don't really remember what they were.
Yeah.
Their client was a pretty nice dude, and he seemed okay, and showed me a picture of his kids or something, Instead, you've got that template for them, and I think it does make it a lot easier for them to come back and provide feedback to the folks they have to answer to when they make a decision. So that's kind of one thing I've been working on that I think's been helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. I always say it's better to have those kind of conversations again, outside of the madness that is the courtroom, if you're trying to kind of, obviously it depends on the case. I mean, a traffic, minor traffic ticket that, may be appropriate to just kind of walk in and explain things and kind of go through it. But, for a more serious case, or depending on the type of relief that you're asking, giving somebody the ability to actually think through it. And also, I've always thought it's kind of strange sometimes for a prosecutor to have to like make a decision based on a request from a defense attorney in front of 10 other defense attorneys, where it's just kind of like, well, where am I setting the bar here for the rest of this morning? And also for the future, right? Like, how much is this decision then going to be used, by the rest of the line behind me? So, but I also love that written document, because it really is like one of those things that there's just so many different cases going through a prosecutor's head. And there's a couple of prosecutors that I know that have like just this, crazy memory, just like that ability to recall any fact pattern and, the conversations that you had with them 6 months ago. But the vast majority, like me, it'd be like in one ear and out the other. And it's just like, I've got 300 things that I got to deal with today. So that is gone as soon as it's come in. So I love that.
Yeah. The easier you can make a decision in your favor for them, the better,
Yeah, that's great. What kind of then drew you from the DA's office into private practice? What kind of was the driver behind that?
Kind of same thing that has driven all the other decisions, of just sort of blind luck of, I came out, had a lot of law school loans, was hoping to get in the loan forgiveness program. But I think back then there were a lot of economic issues going on with the state. Didn't get that, and just sort of seeing, loan payments and credit cards going up every month instead of going down. I loved being over there. It's not all that different. We had a lot of discretion here in Mecklenburg, and it's kind of not all that different. You're not interacting with clients, you're interacting with victims instead, which brings with it its own set of difficulties, and officers. But I love it. I struggle sometimes. It gets to be a grind, like anything else, I'm sure does. But the way I kind of look at it is, I can't think of something else that I would rather be doing than this. Like, I can't see myself not being a criminal defense attorney. And so I think it's just where I am. I'd miss it if I stopped.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, I think that anytime that you have the stress, and I think this is true probably of most practice areas, you have, high stress in the legal field, that there's always those days when it's like, man, what am I doing? But there is really that calling aspect of things. And I think in the criminal defense realm, the fact that you're helping, individual people really does kind of become a part of your identity, in a way that, maybe certain other more transactional practice areas kind of don't feel that same kind of calling aspect to it. For me, I totally agree. Like, I think that, the ability to really change somebody's life through defending them, for me personally, whether that's in the courtroom or at a license hearing, whatever aspect is going on, there's just such a value point to that. There's just such a kind of reward, and it is something that would be difficult to ever step away from, just because it's so much a part of the identity. I think that's it's just kind of who I am, who we are as a firm is kind of wrapped up in that, mission of helping others. And obviously you can do that through any number of industries, but there is just something special about that attorney-client relationship.
Yeah, you're solving a problem that's out there, and there's not always a great solution, but there's, some solutions that are better than others. And it's kind of the challenge and complexity of it is it's enjoyable.
When you get somebody that calls into the office with a criminal matter, what does that conversation look like? Because I feel like in the consultation there is so much nuance in terms of building trust and explaining things to clients and telling them a little bit about who you are. So to me, there's like so much complexity in the consultation. That's one place that I always like to ask people kind of how they approach that initial conversation. So what does that look like for you, Rob?
Sure. And I will say it has changed drastically since COVID. It used to be everyone wanted to come in and talk to you, even just for, their traffic tickets. Like, when can I come sit down? And now it's sort of like, hey, we'll talk on the phone. I don't really need to come down there,
Yeah.
And
what would you say the percentage is for you of people that do like either phone, virtual consult versus in office?
Now I have very few people that come in for an initial consultation.
Yeah,
I mean,
same.
Maybe 10% of cases now.
Yeah.
And most of them don't even want to do Zoom. They just want to talk on the phone for a little bit.
Yeah, it is funny. I tried to move people to Zoom after that because I thought, well, man, this would be, people are used to doing this and they'll prefer to be, seen in person. Very few people wanted to do that. It was like this extra step. It's like, nah, phone call's good. So I kind of gave up on that. We were really trying to like push people in that direction, potential clients, and there was not much buy-in on that idea.
Yeah, it's kind of nice, and maybe I've just kind of become more of a like curmudgeon or an introvert over the years. But I like that. It's less sort of fatigue. So I mean, I would say 90% of folks now it's over the phone. I mean, I remember I had a pretty big federal case in Raleigh, with a client who was out of state. And we never saw each other face to face until probably a year and a half into the case.
That's crazy.
How crazy.
Wow.
I mean, some very serious charges, and he was out of custody. But we did everything over the phone, and it was just very natural. But as far as my consultations go, I used to talk a lot more about the facts of the case and kind of get into the weeds than I do now. Now I kind of we'll talk generally about it, but I'm not going to kind of commit to a position on a case until I've really dug into it. And so I'll tell the person, hey, if you decide to hire us, we're certainly all in, but right now I'm not going to sit here and evaluate over the phone, whether or not I think you have like a 75% chance of winning this probable cause motion. Whereas I think I used to spend a lot more time kind of really diving into those issues. And, I've come to realize, it's hard to, one, make that kind of commitment when you have limited information. There's sort of a story out there of, your case always sounds best during that initial phone call. And then as you get the evidence, things sort of change drastically. And so I think it's just having been down that road so many times that I'm reluctant to give those kind of likely outcomes. I'll tell folks I'm going to do everything I can for your case. Whatever the outcome is, I'm going to make sure that you're coming out of this okay, whether or not, we're necessarily taking a deal, whether or not we're going to trial, we're going to get you through this. And that's sort of the approach that I take, not just at the consultation, but through the case is, good or bad, we're going to deal with this as it comes to us and deal with the information and make our decision.
Yeah, I think that, kind of not forecasting likelihood of success is so important. And obviously from the client's end, you kind of want to have some sense of like, where is this where is this heading? How, what is the, like, even beyond like what's the worst possible outcome, kind of where is the realistic outcome. And it is, one of those things where same thing on my end. I've kind of, more and more kind of moved towards, we're going to need to get all of the officers' reports and video, so that we can make a meaningful evaluation of what if any attack points exist out there. And with us, one of our primary practice areas is DWI. So a lot of clients self-admittedly don't remember a lot about the interaction. Some of them pretend to and don't have the clearest memory of things, and then others have a really good memory. So I mean, it's hard to evaluate who's in which camp. When it comes to more serious charges, I feel like there's sometimes so much going on behind the scenes that the client is not aware of. They think they know all of the information, but don't realize that there's this confidential informant that's been involved. There's an undercover officer that's been sitting outside their house for 2 weeks. I mean, there's all of these kind of missing pieces until you get that officer information, that information back from the state. So, that's definitely been kind of our move, as well as, we need to go get more information about your case. So, kind of pushing it more in the direction of, there's a lot of missing pieces out there that we need to kind of speedily try to go collect, as opposed to trying to kind of give any, specific, feedback on chances of success. I do try to kind of outline what worst case scenario looks like, which, from a sentencing standpoint on DWIs is relatively easy to predict. But in terms of chances of success at trial, that's just kind of like, we've got to wait until we get all the information back.
Yeah. And strangely enough, even though it's kind of spending less time in these initial consultations by not really breaking them down, I don't know if it's same with you guys, but I feel like the rate of clients that hire me has gone up, even though I'm spending significantly kind of less time with these initial discussions.
Yeah, I wonder what, I agree. When I started out, I would say that on a DWI consult, the average time period was about an hour that I would spend with a client. And now it's typically over the phone between 15 and 20 minutes for the initial consult, somewhere in that realm. And I'm there as long as, I don't have like a like kind of scheduled time frame. Like, I'm there as long as the conversation goes on. And some people have a million questions, which I'm happy to answer. And so it's, 45 minutes or an hour still. But it's significantly shortened. And I don't know what percentage of that is just kind of being able to figure out what pieces of information are kind of critical, and then giving kind of the feedback that, the client is most concerned about knowing, like what are the biggest question marks for the client. Or if some of it, maybe it's a combination of factors, but maybe some of it also is, again, as people have moved more into this kind of like world of immediate response, and it's okay to do a phone call versus going in office, that people just need less information to make kind of bigger decisions about. There definitely seems to be, a little bit of a just less barrier of entry almost, in terms of kind of what interaction needs to occur before making a hiring decision. So it's probably some combination of that. Do you have any sense of why that is on your side of things?
Yeah, I haven't really put it together yet. And I mean, it may just be sort of a a function of having been, doing this. I mean, now I'm pushing 18 years in,
right?
As opposed
I'm sure
to,
that's a big part of it.
6 years in, when I'm kind of stumbling around for answers.
Yeah.
Now I've seen this movie a few times now, and I can kind of skip to what's likely the end. And, just maybe the client really just wants to hear you're going to do everything you can for them, even if it's not necessarily going to be the outcome they're looking for, but you're going to push as best you can to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think another piece of it, for us as well, is whenever somebody calls in for a consultation that has been referred, they're typically not necessarily doing some sort of evaluation of you versus another firm. It's more kind of like, is this seem like a good fit? Do I trust this person? And so there definitely is a little bit of an easier time in terms of even just time of conversation with the client that has been referred versus somebody that's just calling from a Google search or wherever they've kind of gotten the information from. Which is why, I've kind of repeatedly talked about like how helpful it is to build a referral business, to try to really make that an important, aspect of your practice. What does that look like for you guys in terms of like networking or referral? Obviously, you do a lot of, kind of more serious crimes and appeals. And so what does that look like in terms of, number of clients that are calling in, from, Google search versus somebody that's kind of been sent over as a referral?
Sure. I think the Charlotte market is different from a lot of other markets. And I mean, maybe Buncombe's a little bit similar in that respect of, there's so many folks here that are really advertising hard.
Right.
On Google or, whatever search engine it is. And it's to the point where here in Charlotte, I think within our office, we've made the decision of, we can't compete and spend all that money, because then you have to make that much more money and do that much more work just to kind of cover the advertising. It's there's some firms that have done an amazing job with it here in Charlotte. We make friends with those firms, and sometimes they have co-defendants.
That's right.
But yeah, we can't compete in that space. We have a pretty good website, and we do a couple sort of the more minimal ones that you need to kind of stay relevant as far as having an Avo profile and that sort of thing in Martindale. But I think for us, those are more giving us legitimacy when a client goes to look us up than necessarily to help land a client who's just searching for law firms.
Right.
And that's the space we've wound up in, and I think it's worked out. I used to do more networking than I do now, but I think that's also just a function of having been doing this a long time. I've kind of gotten to know a lot of lawyers in different practice areas, and so that's been helpful. I also work with some other great attorneys. George Lawrence, one of the best DWI attorneys in the state.
Yes.
And a lot of other practice areas too. But he doesn't go to federal court very often, and so federal case comes in, he sends it over. And same thing sort of with other attorneys in the area that don't wander over there. Same thing with getting to know family law attorneys and that kind of thing. I used to spend more time going and getting a drink after work and that kind of thing with different lawyers and going out to lunch. But I'm sure you kind of know how it goes of just, between kids and work, I'm working till 7 and then going straight home so I can see kids, and spend a little time with them before they go to sleep. And, the idea of a lunch hour now seems like a like a vacation. So,
that's funny. Yeah, for sure.
I definitely don't have as much time to commit to that as I used to. It's more just trying to kind of maintain relationships and that sort of thing. I got a few lawyers that I run with at 5 a.m. That's like my only social time now.
No,
I don't
that's
know if you
great.
feel that same
No,
way.
no, that's great. I think that is such a powerful way to connect. It's a great activity because you can still have a conversation while doing it. So, definitely like kind of killing two birds with one stone, but there's also something that is very, yeah, I mean, more almost like more relationship building in that sense, in terms of having like a shared experience, as opposed to feeling like we're kind of going out, even if there is like a friendship. Sometimes like those forced networking events or inviting somebody to lunch can feel somewhat like salesy, even if you're close friends with that person. It can just have that sense of like, what is this, what's Jake going to ask me for, like, whereas when you're running together, it's like, wow, well, there's physical benefit, and you get the endorphins going. So I mean, there's just such a good I think opportunity within that type of conversation to really build something in a much easier way sometimes. And so, I think there's different ways you can do that. We've got an attorney down in our Greensboro office that's just joined a softball league down there, and has really built some great relationships. It's I think it's Torts Illustrated is the name of their softball team, which is just awesome. But they built some good relationships. I think it's finding where is your passion, and then trying to kind of build a network around that. But I also think that just that kind of niching down aspect of once you've been doing criminal defense for a while, and you've kind of built a practice, people know what kind of work that you do. I'm sure it's the same space everywhere. Not everybody handles sex crimes, not everybody handles federal court, not everybody handles district court. So I think that being able to work with other lawyers on on cases, or again, just putting out there at those specific networking events, or in the courtroom when you're talking to another attorney about what type of cases that you handle. I mean, there's really only a handful of people in our area that handle any type of appellate work. So if you're doing some sort of like post-conviction relief, if you're doing any type of forfeiture hearings for on cases where
talk about a slog.
yeah. I mean, but there's only certain attorneys that are doing those things, and so I think that really can be a way of generating a lot of business. If you're kind of putting out there what your niche is. So
for sure.
Yeah, sounds like you guys have done a great job on that front.
Yeah, and I mean, I definitely put my time in, doing forfeiture and post conviction and appellate work, and it helped a lot, and same thing, going all over the state trying cases, and burning up the road for the first 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
It definitely, I mean, there's a lot of value in that. I don't like to do it anymore, but there's so much that you learn from just trying cases. You even something that seems like a great case for the state, you just never know what'll go wrong, and kind of having that confidence.
It is fun. Yeah, it's wild. There's been a number of cases that I have like looked my client, dead in the eyes, and been like, we're not going to win this trial. My client's like, well, I still want to try it. And then we somehow end up winning. And it's just like, man, like what, how did that happen? It just is, and there's been other times where it's the exact opposite. I feel like we've got this great case, and then, the evidence comes out differently than you're anticipating, or, something goes wrong, or you end up on the wrong day, or whatever it might be. And then, it all falls apart. But it is one of those things where I think that's part of the, part of the benefit to me of being a district attorney, again, this is from no experience, so tell me if you think otherwise, but there are times when you basically have to try a case that maybe you don't feel great about. It's just kind of like, we're gonna put this up in front of the court, and so you have these kind of like borderline cases that you're having to throw up in front of the judge. And I think there's a ton of value in that. There's a ton of value in just having to try stuff. So,
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember being a DA, and I mean, it was like, if you dismiss a DWI, that's almost a fireable offense if you have your witnesses there. So it's, understanding that kind of pressure of you gotta put it up there, whether it's a good case or not. I mean, obviously, if you didn't believe the person was guilty, that's a different story. But if they blew a 20 and maybe you have a little bit of an issue with probable cause, you're going forward. But I do remember one case when you were talking about those cases where it's like, there's no hope. I remember it was a case with like a couple 100 pounds of marijuana. And I remember the district attorney like wheels them in on the little cart. And, we have these weird acoustics in the courtroom. And, there's this little old woman who, you hear her turn next to the juror next to her and goes, "That smells delicious." And then, the juror turns back and goes, "Man, you are absolutely right there." And then it's like, they had their evidence custodian that wasn't fully prepped. And he's like, "Well, I don't know what happened once I put in the evidence." And I'm like, "You think the vice unit could have checked it out and used it for an unbilled recover operation?" He's like, "Yeah, it's very possible." You just never know what's going to happen.
You never know. Yeah, that's so true.
One of them, I remember it was a Miranda issue, and the DA turns to the officer about, "You gave him the Miranda warnings," and he's like, "Of course I did." And she goes, "Can you repeat them for us?" And he goes, You've got the right to a lawyer, and that's all I remember."
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's wild. I mean, but stuff like that happens all the time. It is a wild thing, because I think one of the issues that I would say, especially for me as a young lawyer, that I had would be, I would see a driving while impaired report. And, it's got all of the, like diagrams, and like certain boxes are checks, for each of the standardized field sobriety tests. And there's, notes written in about like, slurred speech or these different things. And so on paper, it just looks like, well, this is pretty open and shut. And then you start, in trial delving into, what clues are you looking for? Well, I don't know any of the clues on the, test, like it's so what's coming out in testimony just does not match up in the least with what's on paper. And so, while getting the evidence
code there too.
Yeah. You got to learn the code. Yeah. It's, while you get you want to get that information back so you can evaluate a case to some extent. The only true way to like evaluate some of those cases is to put them up for trial, because that's the only time you're going to get to really hear that testimony come out. What is on paper versus what the officer is got in terms of prior knowledge. And sometimes it's better for the state as it comes out on the witness stand, so it doesn't always work in your favor.
Yeah, like the DWI videos, I mean, they're 90% of the time they're terrible for us.
Terrible. Yeah.
Sometimes you get some great nuggets. But,
yeah.
If the DA played every one of them, we'd be in trouble.
Yeah, that's so true.
But yeah, you kind of learn, like, if an officer doesn't say they personally observed something, you're kind of like, wait, who actually saw that? You kind of piece that together.
Hey, podcast listeners, I want to briefly interrupt today's episode to invite you to join me at the inaugural Freedom Fighter Summit in Asheville this October. This in-person only event is designed for growth-minded lawyers determined to take their criminal defense practice to the next level. Due to the size of the summit's venue, there are a limited number of seats available. Don't miss out on the incredible lineup of speakers and spectacular networking opportunity that this summit provides. For more details, visit www.freedomfighter.com. www.miniclaw.com/summit. Enter the promo code NCDWI guy, all lowercase, all one word at checkout for $150 off your summit ticket. Look forward to seeing you there. Now back to the show.
So why don't we flip the script here a little bit? I want to hear about your 100-mile race.
Yeah, we can talk some running, because I think to me there's been so much value in running. We've talked a couple of episodes on here about the importance of mental health, especially in like a high stress profession. And for me, running has just been such a such a valuable part of life. I mean, it's just been such a great place to have, space to think about, things at work, things at home, or think about nothing. And so it's just been this incredibly like freeing opportunity. So, I mean, it's the run down in Daytona. I did a kind of like debrief episode on some of the lessons learned. I think that's episode 137, 139.
That the 10 ways that the
ultra marathon. So if anyone wants to go listen to that one. But I mean, to me, it was really one of the best experiences that I've ever had. I mean, it was I got to go down with my my wife crewing me, and my brother pacing me. It was a perfect like intro into that distance, because for the Daytona 100, you were allowed to be supported basically the entire race. So it's a really I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous to say like easy 100-mile race, but like, I mean, in terms of like the support that you could get for that race, it was really kind of like max support level. Yeah. So I mean, it was a just a beautiful day.
So I mean, are you going that's got to be 24 hours almost of road time, maybe more.
Yeah. So it took me 19 hours and 20 minutes to go from Jacksonville to Daytona. So it was a, I've felt really good about that. Like the goal for me was to finish under 24 hours. And so that was, definitely got to check that box. And my brother ran, 50 of those miles plus with me, which was, almost twice as much as he'd ever run in a day. So we both were really kind of pushing way beyond.
Did you stop and like take a nap at some point, or
I didn't stop at any. I think that one of the things that again, it was such an unknown space, and I think that that's part of the reason I want to do one again, is because there was so much that I learned from it. It would be kind of crazy not to do it again. And I've got a race that I signed up for here in December, but I think what the longest that I had run prior to that was 32 miles. I'd done, 50K distance. And so, when my brother started pacing me, it was around mile 35. And, first thing he said was like, "Hey, we're into the unknown," which was literally true. It's like, never gone that far before. And so my strategy was pretty basic and terrible in a lot of ways, which was basically, survive off of protein bars and gels, which, I was very meticulous about the amount of calories I was going to intake. But again, going into this thing again, I would definitely eat a lot more real food. By mile 70, that nutrition plan was pretty awful.
Rid of the cheeseburgers, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get some real food in the system, and maybe that's not for everybody, because I know there are some elite runners that kind of live off of Gatorade mix or whatever kind of sport. Right. but I think I'm definitely somebody that needs a little bit more real food. But from the rest perspective, I think that that's also something that, I probably only stopped at any given aid station for, all of them were less than like 10 minutes. I would say most of them were under 5. And that was probably a mistake in retrospect, for certain of those aid stations. Like I didn't switch my shoes out until mile 93. And it was just like the best decision ever. Like my brother and my wife like kind of had to convince me, like, look, you still, like, that 93 feels so close, but it's like an eternity away. Cause at that point I was moving at like, slow old man walking pace. Like, I mean, it was like, just creeping along. I was trucking along pretty good, I would say, until mile 60. And then like the jog significantly slowed from 60 to 80. And then by 80, like the vast majority of the rest of those miles became like walking miles. And I think part of that was just, I didn't put, I didn't have time to put like enough training into gear to kind of like, recognize maybe some of those earlier miles, like it would have been good to like walk for a mile or two, or to take a longer break at an aid station and really get like kind of refueled fully. So I think that, that's part of the beauty of kind of like pushing into the unknown, is that, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes, which is wonderful, because then you can learn from all of those mistakes that you make. So it was awesome. Like, I mean, from a
did you change clothes at all? That's one of my big questions about mine coming up. It's like, you got to get sweaty and chafing. I don't know.
I
You
ran.
don't need to get too into detail on that.
No,
on the
no,
show.
no. I ran probably a good portion of the day with basically like just shorts. So basically in the Florida humidity, it was a pretty mild day. I mean, it was only, I would say that the top temperature was probably around like 75. So it wasn't like crazy.
Still pretty warm, yeah.
But yeah, pretty warm and humid. And so, the humidity is what, is problematic in terms of chafing. And so I think that for me, I was like, the less clothing that I have on, the less likely that there's going to basically be an issue. So a ton of Vaseline. I've kind of went crazy, just, that was applied, I would say probably almost every aid station. Might have been like every other, but I was pretty heavy on that. That was one of the tips that one of the runners gave at like the kind of day before check-in, is like, don't start using Vaseline once you're raw, because it's too late at that point. Like, just kind of stay ahead of the game on that front. So I kind of took that to heart, and I really didn't have any chafing issues throughout the whole day. I wore a shirt for part of the like hot part of the day with a like an ice towel. The biggest thing that was so killer, that was like a mid-race adjustment, was it was getting pretty hot from about like mile 35 to 60. And heat training, or really thinking about like a cooling strategy. Again, this was not part of like my planning. I know people like really go into detail about like what their heat strategy looks like, but I got one of these like cooling towels that you can buy, and just put like an ice pack in that with it like wet, and change that out at every aid station. And from the first time that I did that, it was like magic. It really, like, it was such a big part of the success of just not feeling like absolute crap. I think once you get too hot, then there can be some real issues with being able to eat, or put in fluids and all that. I think that a lot of like stomach issues come from just the overheating problem. So what your race is, what time of year is that?
So I'm doing Chicago in the fall, but then my first ultra is going to be in May. So I'm
Okay.
starting. There'll be a 50 miler in the Grayson Highlands.
Okay. So that, I mean, depending I mean, it's one of those things that it could be really cool or it could be really hot, like
Yeah.
that's a tough, they just, I just, helped out as a volunteer at the Hellbender here in Black Mountain, Old Fort area this past weekend, or not this last weekend, but the weekend before. And I think last year they ran that race like in the midst of all of that like hurricane aftermath that was coming through that really like impacted Charlotte area hard and
Right. Yeah, I
impacted
remember that. Yeah.
that was the day that they ran the race. So there was like
Yeah. I mean, there were some
thunderstorms going
roads
on.
that just completely
Yeah,
washed
it
out on the
was.
mountains, right? Yeah.
I was talking with a lady that had run. She was one of the other volunteers, and she said it was just a mess. Like moving at like no speed because there's just mud. But you're trying to run up a trail, and there's just like mud. There's that you're just slipping back every time that you take a step. So it sounded like pretty horrendous. And then the one that I helped volunteer at, was really nice weather, kind of mild temperature. So I mean, a lot of it I think just depends even on the elements. But a couple of the racers talked about their heat strategy, which is wild because there was also people that were dealing with like hypothermia up on Mount Mitchell. So like at the same time that there's like racers that are applying like ice packs and trying to keep the body cool, there's also like the hypothermia concern for runners. So I mean, there's just so many like things like that too.
Yeah. You can only plan on so many things and
Yeah,
spend so much time,
so many factors. Yeah, but what kind
which
of
is where
led
the
you?
second one will be awesome is, you've kind of
Yeah,
got that base.
yeah. I mean, it'll be different because it is like a trail run, so it'll be less support. But I also think the wonderful thing about Daytona, in addition to being easy, was it was beautiful. I'm a beach person, and so like you're running along the coast the whole time, with the ocean right there. I mean, it was just gorgeous. Um, but in
I was
terms,
a beach person before I had kids, and just, 8 hours in the hot sun trying to keep them from running out, and
yeah, yeah,
that's when I became a mountain person.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, but I mean, there's just something magnificent about like running through the trails. Again, something that's like so. I feel like for anybody that has to sit in an office for a good part of your day, getting outside, whether it's on the city streets, or if you can make it, to a trail where you can kind of like re-ground yourself with nature. I want to sound like too earthy or something like, but it just, there's just something wonderful to me about like that, being in creation. I mean, it just is such a cool regrounding
Oh yeah.
aspect.
Yeah. It'll be slower, but it'll be kind of almost a little less painful, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not when it's 100 miles.
In terms of like some of your racing strategies, nutrition training, I mean, it seems like you've been doing it for a while now, so tell me what are
Well,
some of the
I'm
things?
I'm actually pretty new to it also. I
Oh yeah,
think
okay.
about a year, well, yeah, right around a year ago, my wife was running a marathon in where is it? Duluth, and that's like in
Oh yeah, George.
Wisconsin or
Oh,
Minnesota,
okay, right,
one of those states in that
okay.
area. And I don't know. I think she caught me in a moment of weakness, and I agreed to join her and do it with her. And I mean, I kind of like running the marathons, but it's the training that I've enjoyed. It's sort of
Yeah,
that zen time when I'm either on my own or maybe hanging out with a few friends, and the kind of thing you just don't get during the day between talking to clients, going to court, everything else that goes on. And so, that's probably what I've enjoyed about it the most. I used to have some other hobbies, and I kind of found myself like, I'm like, I don't have any hobbies anymore, and so something different.
yeah, it is. I mean, yeah, I agree. I think that with the time constraints of practicing law and, having a family and, whatever other, activities that are going on that are either family related or, community related, there's just, it is hard to like find the time to kind of get into something. And, I think, running has become like that, hobby, passion project. Like it really does like give a lot of energy to the other areas of life, because there's just such a mental refueling that happens through running. I mean, do you find that as well?
Oh, absolutely. I guess I used to play a lot of poker back, when I
I
was
saw
younger.
that. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
crazy. How wild is
but
that?
it just doesn't coalesce sort of with, a family life,
Yeah, yeah.
um, so running is a much healthier lifestyle than doing that. Staying out a card game till 3 a.m, and not only that, having a wife who was an assistant district attorney, as she started prosecuting more serious cases. So like, police occasionally raid these games, with the vice squad kicking doors in. And then she moved up to violent crimes and, started seeing these games getting robbed with shotguns. And it's like, you're done. And I'm like, that's fair. I was getting kind of tired to stay out that late anyway. So
yeah, I'm sure that there's got to be some amazing lessons that are applicable to other parts of life, particularly like the law through poker. I mean, there's got to be some pretty serious crossover there.
I see everything through a sort of a lens of, I can make it very impersonal with these decisions of, and it is helpful in that respect of kind of, just, I would say the number one lesson I learned is just aggression makes a big difference. Not like in your face, yelling at a district attorney type aggression, but just kind of not backing down. This is for trial. We're not stipulating to anything. Very cordial about it.
Yeah.
But you can't show weakness, and I think that has gone a long ways. Especially when it comes to things like stipulations. There's just too many things that can go wrong for the state, in trial. And the more you force them to meet their burden, the more elements there are that kind of pop up along the way. So it's that's kind of the number one lesson I learned is a lot of times there's no downside to just pushing and asking for what you want.
Yeah, no, I think that it is interesting to hear you kind of talk about like that making things kind of 2 points. I feel like that default aggressive attitude really does help a lot of times. I mean, again, not necessarily personality wise, but just in terms of how you're taking the case. And that can be in the courtroom, but it also can be, I think, in every aspect of how you're handling the case. So, when somebody, signs up with you, as opposed to waiting 3 months down the road before filing a discovery motion, like that goes out the next day, like trying to get information back that could be good or bad for you, but being aggressive about getting that information back from the state, being aggressive kind of from your client's perspective about preparing them for court, having them ready to go on a sentencing, a serious sentence that they might be facing. What mitigation can they be doing right now? If you wait until 3 days before it's time for the judge to issue sentence, that's a problem. There's not, so that default aggressive mindset really does, I think,
telling your client the day before court, I need you to go get 3 character letters.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Which I think
this afternoon,
we're such a procrastinating bunch, sometimes just out of sheer necessity, because there's so much coming down the pipeline. But I feel like if you have that default aggressive attitude, it really can serve you well.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to kind of come to this like an hour into the thing. I should have led off with it, but I remember when I first started getting some advice from like some old school lawyers here in Charlotte, that would talk about how, when you've got a client that's being a pain, just ignore their call for 3 days and most problems will go away.
Yeah.
Then they'd have their stories too about, just this other lawyer who showed up for a trial with a notepad and turned to, one of the other attorneys there and goes, "What's this person charged with again?"
Yeah.
And wins the case, and it's
Yeah.
such terrible advice.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, that is.
You got to be proactive, both, returning calls immediately and then in preparing, from the beginning instead of waiting until the last minute, watch the videos, read the reports, take your notes, and then you can put it aside and come back to it when you get closer to the day. But yeah, exactly like you said, it's preparation.
Yeah, and I feel like too, the other thing that you said, and again, I don't know if this is like from poker, poker lesson that was learned, but just not being necessarily personally invested. Again, it doesn't mean that you don't care about your client, but not kind of getting like overly emotionally wrapped up in a case. I really feel like that's one of the primary places where burnout happens. I think for most of us, we take some of our work home with us. Like that's, it's impossible not to kind of be maybe nervous about this upcoming jury trial or be worried about this client that, has, this family that's depending on him that's now, looking at, 2 years in custody or whatever it might be. I mean, there's definitely parts of it that are just going to be stressful, but I feel like the more that you can, try to compartmentalize some of that, try to stay, kind of keep your out of office time, your family time as your family time. I mean, I feel like that's where attorneys that to me are very compassionate and good attorneys in the courtroom are still able to kind of do it for a long period of time and not get burned out because they're not getting overly emotionally invested in each case.
That's a great issue. And I feel like I've really kind of pinballed over the years with respect to that. I mean, I remember, when I first started doing more serious cases, and I mean, I would have some people that, committed some pretty serious crimes, but, you spend some time with them, their kids have come to the office with, with their wife and, you've seen them and, they're, I get it. They're consequences for actions, and I remember it would really kind of eat me up when I'd see, someone get just massively hammered. And I guess back then my definition of massively hammered might be, seeing them get an 8-year sentence, and it would tear me up, and
yeah,
now it's kind of struggling with the other side of things when I'm kind of used to dealing with these really big numbers now, and, kind of having the opposite problem of maybe getting to not getting as invested in kind of how much those numbers mean to people, and it's hard to kind of find that balance of not really stressing yourself out, but versus making sure you continue to remain invested. You don't want to just tell yourself like, hey, that's what happens when you rob a bank, you go to prison, and versus beating yourself over the fact that, these people do have consequences. And it's tough figuring the line there.
It is. Yeah, it is a tough balance. And I think it's worth talking about with other lawyers, as to how they kind of manage that part of their life, because I do think that to me, where the kind of like substance use issues come in within the bar is primarily, and again, this is not based on any like mental health statistics or anything, but primarily where people are just not able to kind of leave their work at work. And again, there's always going to be some sort of spillover there. Like, I mean, we don't just, live completely compartmentalized lives, but I think not having that, those spaces that really are designed to kind of re-energize, reduce. And that again is where like the running has played such a powerful role in my own, like I would say mental health, is just to have that kind of like quiet, focused time where there's really, nothing to, nothing necessarily to respond to. Sometimes that's, just it's so needed to have that like mentally freeing space. So whatever that looks like, I think, people have to find that. Otherwise, that burnout is just, it's coming.
Yeah, and I mean, you're absolutely right. It's very easy to like get off work and have many drinks and kind of try and put it aside. And getting past that has been, it's a struggle, and I think that has, working on that side of things has helped deal with these issues a lot. The running, especially, if you're getting up at 4:45 in the morning, you can only stay up so late anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That's so true.
But I mean, that's not
yeah.
That's not all there is to it. I remember for a long time I would get up early and I could still, sit up and drink a lot of beers at Hot Drops at night and whatever, So it's a journey.
It is. Yeah. No, I agree.
But, I mean, and maybe that's helped make me a better lawyer is, when you do see these horrible crimes and you're able to sort of tell a judge, listen, we recognize, some of this stuff is, my client played a part in something that was, I mean, there's no other way to describe it as, nefarious, and acknowledge that, and then say, but, there's this other side to things, and, kind of here's his limited part in it. And being able to acknowledge those things goes a long way. It doesn't always fix things, but it's a start.
For sure. Yeah. No, I think that the self-reflection piece is critical. I think, whatever, else you're doing in terms of like setting aside time to, work on your business, or obviously take care of your physical health, obviously have, family time. I do think that there is that need to kind of regularly like step back from, practicing law and just kind of sit, see how does that feel? I think that you maybe kind of like put it best earlier in the conversation when you kind of talked about how, there's the stressors that naturally come along with criminal defense, but at the same time, you kind of almost couldn't see yourself doing anything else like that. It's just, so much a part of the identity. It's just difficult to kind of even imagine, being in a different, work environment or doing something else. And, I think for lawyers, we got to step back and kind of, figure out, why, how to separate some of those things, really to reflect on how, is this something that kind of is still bringing that, passion at the end of the day? Because again, I think if you spend too many years, like kind of going through it just for, getting through the grind, it will have devastating impacts on your own health, but also on the lives of your clients as well.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know how else to put it. I think that's pretty dead on.
Well, Rob, maybe we can, I don't know, this might be a good place to kind of wrap up the conversation to some extent. So tell me, like, in terms of if you're talking to, a young lawyer, about kind of practicing criminal defense, whether you're kind of offering, strategic advice or life advice, what advice do you have for young lawyers out there that are either, getting ready to go in? Let's say we got a listener coming from law school going into the DA's office or the public defender's office, or a couple of years under their belt. What is your advice to young lawyers in the profession?
One of them is it gets easier. I remember, how stressful it was building a business for the first few years. I'm sure you went through that. And kind of sitting there waiting for the phone to ring and that, because clients don't just show up at your door and say, I need a lawyer.
Especially now.
Right. And so it gets better over time. I mean, it took, a solid 10 years, I feel like, before things really started clicking, and, you kind of build up your base of clients and referrals and that sort of thing. And that's one thing that it definitely gets easier. You just got to keep going at it, keep studying, keep reading the cases every week that come out, and learning those areas, and it gets better. That's one. And then two is just not being afraid to reach out to other lawyers that have been doing it for a while. I have a few attorneys that I've worked with that are newer, and, they text me questions all the time about, whatever it is, what should I charge in this situation? What the hell do I do here? I don't even know where to get started. And I'm always happy to answer those questions. It may be, I can't pick up the phone right that minute, but if they send me a text, I'm happy to answer, and, just kind of not being afraid to reach out. I'm not a great communicator necessarily, and so I feel like I didn't do as much of that as I should have. Kind of getting started, just wanted to push my way through. But I feel like folks are more than happy to help out. So that's the other one.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge point. I mean, when you are first starting out, everything feels so difficult, figuring out how in this particular county a motion to continue is done. Is there a specific form? Is it done orally? Do I have to show up? Do I fax it? I mean, it's the stupid little stuff, it's not even like, it's not even the big, case brief that you have to, bring with you, or what, forget all the like legal issues that there are in terms of not knowing that specific area of law. It's just like, how do I get a limited driving privilege filed? Did
you ever have that moment, like when you were young and you like travel to some other counties and you're just kind of sitting there quietly in the chair, like, what the hell do I do here?
Oh my gosh. All the time,
who's the DA here,
Yeah, just you try to figure out from a clerk, or somebody else that's in the courtroom, bailiff, another attorney, how am I doing this thing? And that's where I think, to your point, just asking other lawyers in the defense bar, I think that one of the challenges of being a new lawyer is you feel like there's just so many stupid questions. You don't want to be the one to ask like a stupid question. And, I think it's just like, it's just like anything else where other people that have been through that same problem, ahead of you, recognize how big of a hurdle it is to kind of just not know the system. And so, one thing that I noticed a lot more as I would sit in courtrooms is that the attorneys that were bouncing ideas off of each other were much more like primarily like the older attorneys that have been doing it for 20 years. And we're still like bouncing cases off each other and question, how do you think we should do that? And so at some point it was like, well, man, if they're still asking questions, then I definitely should be asking questions. Like, I mean, I don't even know how to get this case continued. So, I think that that's part of it, is just recognizing that the learning game is never going to be over. And so, if you're in a good bar, and I think most of the counties across the state have good bars, from what I've seen, finding somebody that knows what they're doing, has been doing it for a while, is more than happy to give you some pointers. And so obviously don't necessarily just send a list of 100 questions to that person. But I think in real time, bouncing a question off of an attorney or whoever else in the courtroom might be able to help. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing that's really just flat out intuitive about so much of what we do. It's just, hey, this is kind of how practice has evolved. And it's so intimidating when you first start off, just figuring out even where to get started. I mean, now it's different. I'm happy to walk into whatever county and just kind of go up there, and you get used to interacting with judges
Yeah.
and DAs and how things go. But when you first get started, man, it was just sitting there nervously being like, what, am I going to get yelled at for doing this?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, even, there was a visiting judge that we have up here frequently that I really love, the way that he handles the courtroom. And he's from down in Charlotte area, Judge Mercer. And he, has just got such a great attitude. But one of the things that he said to me recently, because I said, like, you travel to all these different jurisdictions, how do you figure it out? And he just gave like such a great, simple, humble answer. Is like, when I come into the courtroom of a county that I've never been in before, I just go up to the clerk and say, you tell me how we're supposed to do this. Let me know if I'm, issuing a sentence that, is kind of that's not what we're, give me some feedback, talking again to the people that know best generally in the courtroom, which is the clerks. And so, just such great advice. I mean, whether you're a judge, DA, or, on the criminal defense end of things, going up to the people that are to some extent running the show and getting some feedback on how you're doing things just makes it so much easier. I feel like whenever you're trying to force something into the system that is not how it's done, there is so much resistance, even to the smallest thing. But if you go up and kind of politely just ask, hey, I don't, I'm not familiar with this, can you walk me through it? More often than not, the clerks, or again, another attorney, is going to be like, hey, let me walk you through this, let me walk you through this process. And just approaching it with humility, as opposed to pretending like you know what you're doing when you don't, creates so much better will from the people in charge.
Yeah, Mercer is amazing. I kind of grew up with him as one of the judges that I would regularly practice in front of, both as a young ADA and then as a young defense lawyer. And yeah, he's so welcoming and so happy to help. And
yeah, he is.
So just straight common sense. Yeah, I remember trying resisting arrest as a young ADA with him, and this defendant, I guess he got it to his head that the officer wound up punching him at some point during the encounter when he was resisting, and that was like kind of the cornerstone of his defense. And I remember he said that, and then Mercer turned to him and goes, "I would have punched you too."
It's such a, there's so much, I mean, it's just crazy how much nuance there is with all of that, in terms of, again, knowing your court, and how much of a factor, all of these, minor things seem to play into, every single part of the process, which is, again, why it can feel so overwhelming as a young lawyer, because it just seems like every courtroom that you step into seems like its own universe, sometimes within the same county, right? Like, a superior court versus district court, or you're in front of this judge versus that, you've got this DA in the courtroom versus this other one. It just, there's so much of this, game to figure out. Like, I mean, it really is this big puzzle.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, just experience, and kind of learning exactly, evidence on the record and that kind of thing, can, getting that under your feet makes such a difference when you're used to kind of, when you've seen enough probable cause motions, to kind of take it back to DWIs, what's acceptable and what's not, and then that's where, your experience can really help out when you're dealing with newer DAs who might not present tests properly. They might
Right.
talk about, have the officer go through and I don't know DWIs as well as I'm sure you do, and a lot of the other lawyers that you have that come on here. I do a fair number of them, but I'm not as talented as you guys are when it comes to things like deconstructing the field sobriety tests and that sort of thing. And it's definitely a skill set I need to continue to work on. But just from kind of other practice, areas within criminal defense, you learn, like, for example, if you have an officer that gets up there and, spends 10 minutes talking about the different clues that he saw and how that resulted in 6 of 6 clues on the HGN, and then the DA finishes their case, but then the officer never went through and said, well, 6 out of 6 clues connotates to a 84% chance of impairment or something like that. You get up there when you go through your arguments on probable cause and be like, listen, you heard 6 of 6 on the HGN, but what does that mean? There was no evidence in the record at all to say that means they're likely to be impaired. Those kind of little things really make a difference.
They do make a difference. And I think, from a, it's another part of why it gets easier over time, because there's just so much to learn. I mean, the amount of information that you're that kind of puts you, in a kind of niche arena, so to speak, or kind of in this, like into these nuances of this particular crime. It just is so powerful. And when you start out, almost everybody else in the courtroom has more experience than you. I mean, the judge has heard thousands of these cases. The DA in the courtroom, even if they're only 2 or 3 years out of law school, has tried hundreds of cases. I mean, there's just so much experience in the courtroom around you. And then as you start to build your practice, I mean, one of the few advantages I would say that the defense has in DWI cases or in district court is that the vast majority of counties, and I would say particularly in large counties, the defense lawyer, if you've been doing it for 5+ years, has more experience than the prosecutor. It's just like a high turnover. You're getting your kind of feet wet in district court, and obviously there's some places that might have a attorney that kind of specializes in DWI cases, or focuses in some aspect of district court, but for the most part, it's kind of like the stepping stone to more serious cases. So, after 5-10 years, you generally have, more experience than the person sitting at the other table. And there are things that every inexperienced lawyer, regardless of which table that you're sitting at, is going to miss. I mean, even if you're the most experienced lawyer, you're going to miss something. So, that is one of those things, again, that just makes it easier over time, because at first you're at that knowledge disadvantage.
One other thing that I listened to your 10 ways that running a marathon is like practicing criminal defense. So the one thing that I really liked on that was you talked about sort of how defense attorneys sometimes have a tendency to look at this like we're in a competition with each other.
Yeah.
And how that's not the case. And that would be, I guess, my other piece of advice for younger lawyers. It's, you're going to be practicing with these people for the next, 25 years, possibly.
Yeah.
And these might be the folks who, are going to send you a great case that's, you're going to bill $200,000 or $300,000 for over a number of years, and so learning to accept that, there's going to be a lot of work out there, and we're going to be working together for a long time. That's the other lesson that I think is great. You don't want to sit here and, say something bad about another attorney during a consultation who they, maybe they met with, one of your competitors in the area. There's no benefit to saying something negative about another attorney, especially during a consultation. That word gets around, and it doesn't look good. And it's not going to get you anywhere.
I 100% agree. Yeah, no, I mean, 100% agree. There's no benefit to doing that. And again, it is one of those things where, it is such a big mindset piece, because it really is, that idea that everybody is out to take cases that I'm trying to go after. We're all at war with one another is very much a scarcity mindset. And as soon as you have that, kind of mindset with regards to the legal marketplace, it extends to other parts of your business. And, so that free flow of information begins to shut down, both in terms of like reaching out to other attorneys and giving information to other attorneys. When you have the sense that we are all kind of playing the game on the same team, where we're all kind of playing our own individual games, but there's not this competition mindset. That makes it much easier to go out and talk to other lawyers and ask for feedback and bounce cases off of one another. And obviously, send a referral to somebody else without thinking, like I can't let my my competitor have this value. I can't. It's such a foreign concept to me. Like I can't even very, very well picture kind of what that process would be. But there's just so much value in having that close bar. I mean, if you've got a criminal defense bar, it's one of the things that I really love about practicing in Buncombe is the bar here is just unbelievable. I mean, so many people have helped me throughout the years, and there's a real kind of collective feel to the bar in Buncombe. And again, I've seen that in other places, but I can really feel the support from that here, and it's such a value point, and it just makes practicing law better. I mean, one of the things I hated about like the limited time that I had in the civil arena is it felt like everybody was out to get me. Like, I mean, it felt like every case there was a motion against me for sanction, like it is just constantly, bar complaint threats and stuff, just total cutthroat environment. And that's one of the beautiful things to me about the criminal defense world is the amount of camaraderie that exists there.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Well, Rob, I appreciate all of the advice and thoughts, and we're going to have to get a run in soon together. The next time I'm going to be down in Charlotte for the NCAJ convention. So hopefully we can maybe connect in June or the next time you're up this way, we'll get a trail run in.
Yeah, for sure. I know I said I don't like traveling to too many counties, but Buncombe is one of the few counties that, I mean, it's just great up there. If I could start over, I would start there, but I'm not willing to go through the start over process.
That's awesome. Love it. If you found the information in this podcast to be valuable, I simply ask that you pay it forward and share this podcast with another member of the legal community. Also, if you would leave us a rating or a review on whatever platform you are listening on, I would greatly appreciate it.